All right, guys, we are doing another deep dive today, and today I'm tackling 10 vintage perfume notes or fragrance notes, and I'm ranking it. These are my own rankings, and these are my own lists, obviously. You might consider another note that's not on this list more vintage than what I consider vintage here, but I think you might agree with me with most of these. And what I'm going to do is start with number one first. So it's starting with the best, or the one I feel like is the number one vintage note that used to appear in a lot of fragrances of yesteryear that hardly appears now. So what I've got going on is a top 10 list starting with number one, and each note is featuring 5 fragrances. And most of them should be modern. I have thrown in some classics here and there, but the majority of these fragrances are pretty modern releases. But as I said, there are a few classics thrown in there. So before we get started with the list, please let me know what you consider a vintage note in perfumes. And if you can put together your top 5 or your top 10 vintage perfume notes, please do. And as I said, these are mostly modern fragrances. So if you're thinking this is a video of vintage fragrances, it's not. These are, like I said, very modern, mostly modern, but I've thrown in some classics here and there because some of the notes are not very well represented with modern fragrances. That's why I have the classics thrown in. So this is going to be a longer than normal video. We've got 50 fragrances here, 10 notes, 5 fragrances each. So yeah, sit back, maybe make some popcorn, pause the video when you need to, and let's get started with the list. So we're going with Oakmoss as my number one favorite vintage note, or I would also say my number one, well, it should be my number one vintage note because I consider this to be probably the note that most people want to have back. And it was used quite a bit in fragrances, and it's rarely used now. But they are starting to use Oakmoss again. They have figured out chemistry to extract the portions that are not allowed to be used and only use like this tiny little portion of however they do it with chemistry. But there are fragrances that featured Oakmoss before that are amazing. But, you know, I consider these 5 fragrances here, fairly modern fragrances, to be great representations of fragrances featuring Oakmoss. First of which is Mousse Illuminee, which was recently featured in a Scent Club kit. Awesome fragrance from the house of Rogue Perfumery. Have you guys tried this one? So we had this in a kit last autumn, but we have some individual bottles left in our Scent Club store. You can take advantage of those if you haven't gotten your nose on this, which I'm assuming you would because I've hyped this one up so much. It's an awesome release. It smells so awesome and green and slightly boozy, but herbal, aromatic, and very mossy. I would also go to the extent and say it's a bit petrichor-like as well, but kind of a damp, earthy forest floor experience. That's super fantastic. There are some notes in there that do come off a bit boozy in there. I think it's the Artemisia. And a lot of folks say it reminds them a little bit of Irish Spring soap. Does that do that for you guys? I guess for me, it doesn't smell like it. It gives me the idea of it more than the smell because I have used Irish Spring soap in the past. And the smells are not similar to me, but the ideas might be the same. So the second, I've got some bottles here that are pretty wobbly, so got to be careful. But the second fragrance I'm going to talk to you about in the Oakmoss category is Ylang 49 from the house of Le Labo. You guys familiar with this one? Definitely one of my all-time favorites from Le Labo. This is a vintage pre-Estee Lauder bottle. Oh, man, it's so good, guys. This is also called Ylang 49. It's Ylang Ylang, a tropical floral note that has slight banana-ish fruity, undertones and things like that. But it's used quite a bit in in floral fragrances. But this is, for me, it's about the Oakmoss, because that's what I like about this. To me, it's like oak mossy and also patchouli and very vintage-esque. And I mean, I think there have been a few fragrances discontinued from Le Labo. I hope this one never does get discontinued, because it reminds me a little bit of something that I have here that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. This is a brand called Jean Couturier, and it's Coriander, which gives you an idea of one of my other vintage notes that I'm going to talk to you about. That's the idea it gives me, but further than that, it also gives me the idea of the Clinique fragrance Aromatics Elixir, which are both Chypre style fragrances, and Ylang 49 is a Chypre. So I took all that to explain that it was a Chypre, because it reminds me of both of those fragrances. That's what I like about this one. But, you know, when you really focus on the Ylang note, you'll experience it, but there's so much oak moss and patchouli, and it does kind of cover it up, hide it. But once you get past that, you get that kind of tropical floral touches, kind of banana-ish texture of the Ylang perfectly there. Such an awesome scent that is. If you haven't tried it and you like those old school style fragrances, please do. But this next one's from the house of Ormonde Jayne. This is Evernia, which means oak moss or moss. And this is a modern take on oak moss. It's also a little, when you wear it, a bit piney. So if you like those kind of fragrances, try this one, because I get that from wearing it. It gives me the stems or the base of the pine tree, the wood part, and then also the green part, which is more green and aromatic. So it gives me that kind of an idea. So it's a very woody experience, but the mossiness is quite prominent too, which I'm assuming that's how the part of the oak moss or moss they're using is smelling here. But I think it's a combination of all the other notes. Certainly gives me a frosted, cool, snowed on trees, but fragrant trees you can smell. Very woody, very aromatic, very spicy. Really awesome stuff. Not many people talk about Evernia. It's a really great scent from the house of Ormonde Jayne. Let me know if you're familiar with that. Then we're going to the house of Ex Nihilo. It's French Affair. Now, French Affair, you should have just heard about in another video, a long form deep dive video of Canton Biche fragrances. This is a Canton Biche fragrance. And, you know, Ex Nihilo is a brand that I really love, but I don't like their prices. So I try and find deals on their fragrances. Buy them in France. They're cheaper. They're almost like 100-ish cheaper. But this is also a bit old school leaning. This is a lot of woods again. Kind of similar idea to Evernia, but they don't smell alike, if that makes sense. It's dry, it's dusty, dried grassy and woody, and then of course spicy. Then this one, French Affair, has a bit more of an old school vibe in comparison to Evernia, which smells a bit more modern, if that makes sense. But really awesome. This is definitely one of my favorites from the house of Ex Nihilo by perfumer Canton Biche. Let me know if you've tried it. What are your thoughts? What do you guys think of oak moss as the #1 vintage note? Do you agree with me? Because 9 out of 10 times people mention how they wish that they would have oak moss back in fragrances. And they can't believe that oak moss was banned or regulated, if that makes sense. But the next fragrance is from the house of Commodity. It's Moss Plus. So Moss Plus, on the other hand, is a very citrusy green take on moss or oak moss. And they utilized a lot of petitgrain here. So it's very citrusy, but also bitter. This stuff is so good, guys. If you ever have broken off the leaves of the orange tree or the lemon tree, and you've kind of cut it, like broken in half, and saw the little oils spurt out of it when you kind of break it in half, there's oils in there. This reminds me of that, plus the mossiness, the damp, forest floral-like effect. So good. Really, really awesome green. And the Moss Plus for me is the best out of all of them. That's why I'm featuring this one here, because it's super dense and intense, and the greenness really comes alive. You like green fragrances, but a citrusy green and a mossy green rather than, you know, another kind of green like tomato leaves or lily of the valley or something. You got to try that. That's so delicious. I had forgotten about how great that Moss Plus is, but really lovely stuff. Awesome stuff. So then, number 2, I would say aldehydes. What are your thoughts with aldehydes as a number 2 vintage note? Again, I just put these out there because I consider these vintage notes. These were used quite a bit, you know, when perfumery was like, let's say like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70, 80, 100 years ago, these ingredients were used a lot more. Although moss was probably used much later. But I feel like moss is probably the one note that people would wish that would come back. Aldehydes is still used today, but I feel like aldehydes were used quite a bit, like Chanel No. 5, which was launched in the 1920s, 100 years ago. Is it the 100-year anniversary of Chanel No. 5? Did it launch in 25? I can't remember the exact date. But anyway, Chanel No. 5 used it, and it's been used for a long, long time. But it's still being used. And I've got a slew of 5 fragrances, 2 of them with flankers of each other. So I've got a total of 7 fragrances here. We're going to start off first with Blanche by Byredo. And then I also have the Absolu de Parfum of Blanche right there. So we'll first talk about the OG Blanche. I'm not too familiar yet with the flanker, but I'll tell you about it as much as I can. But if you like effervescent fragrances, clean fragrances, musky fragrances, Blanche is definitely the fragrance for you. There's a fizziness about it, but also totally musky here, really. But it's not like your deer musk type of musk. It's more like, you know, like white musk, the clean musk, the synthetic musk. But this also has some flowers in the base, some floral notes, and also it's powdery because it does get powdery. And then there's some woods under there as well. But if you like clean fragrances with an effervescence, you should try Blanche. But I have a feeling some of the fragrances here that I'm going to mention are also going to be sort of similar to Blanche. They just go in a little bit of a different direction. But let's try the Absolu de Parfum version of Blanche. Now, I thought the Absolu de Parfum versions of these Byredo fragrances were higher concentrated. And even though they say in their marketing write-up that it is, but it's still eau de parfum concentration. And you can smell that it's not as airy and transparent as the OG Blanche. It's also a bit spicier. That's all the differences I'm getting. Otherwise, it's very similar to the original, but you can smell the denseness of the Absolu de Parfum. And even though I thought I was getting an Extrait de Parfum, but it's Absolu de Parfum and it's eau de parfum concentration, according to wherever I read it. It's on the box most likely. But I read that this is an eau de parfum, not a Extrait de Parfum, which is kind of a bummer. Anyway, but if you like a denser, I tried the Absolu de Parfum. It's definitely thicker. You can totally notice it because the other one is a lot more transparent, airy. This version is thicker and denser. Then it's a bit spicier to me as well. And I'm still trying to learn it, but if you like it more concentrated, go with the concentrated version. But next we've got Les Eaux Primordiales Color Premiere. So I discovered this brand at Javoy in 2022. And that's the fragrance I bought from them at the time. At Javoy is where I bought it. And I was very intrigued with the brand. It's become one of my favorite brands, by the way. And I asked the associates at Javoy, and they said this is a new release, and it's pretty popular. I bought it because it's clean. It does remind me of Blanche a little bit. And it's different, but it's the similar idea. It's musky, it's clean, it's for sure aldehydic. There's an effervescence about it. There might be some light floral notes, some creamy woods. But if you're thinking, this also does act a little thicker than the original Blanche. It seems a bit heavier, which is kind of cool as well. And the cool thing about this product from Les Eaux Primordiales, they have this most amazing shower foam. Oh God, it's so good. I had some during my last European trip, and I used it on my travels. It's like this. It's like it comes in like a mousse. Like in the 80s, they had these mousses you would style your hair with. It's that kind of a bottle, but it's for lathering your body, and it's so super smooth and cream, very kind of decadent creaminess. Like it's almost like what do you call it? What am I gonna say? Not chocolate mousse, but whipped cream. It's almost like whipped cream is what I'm trying to say. And it's amazing to lather with it and wash it off. You smell great with it. And it's all very aldehydic and clean smelling. And you basically come out of the shower clean smelling because you're showering yourself with an aldehydic scented body mousse or something. But a great fragrance if you don't know Color Premier from the house of Les Eaux Primordiales. Not my number one fragrance from that house, but definitely a top 10, if not a top 5. Then it's not the latest, but fairly the latest, Acne Studios from the house of Frederic Malle. So this is an aldehydic balm. You know, there's something about Frederic Malle's bottles and sprayers that I really love. I think their sprayers are also what makes the fragrances a bit more potent, like robust. They really know how to spray, you know? A lot comes out of there. So Acne Studios is a collaboration between Frederic Malle and fashion house Acne Studios. This is the third collaboration that Frederic Malle has done with a clothing or fashion house. First, it was Dries Van Noten. That got discontinued because Dries Van Noten launched his own fragrances. Then it was Albert Elbaz, and he passed away. It was another fashion house, but a very small fashion house, not very famous. He passed away. That got discontinued. Now it's Acne Studios, and this is a pretty hyped fashion house. So are they going to launch their own fragrances as well later on? So this is got a bit of smokiness running throughout it because there is frankincense in the notes. But in the end, it's kind of similar idea to the first two fragrances we just spoke about. There's leather here, there's rose. It eventually kind of gets deeper as it's drying down. But it's a similar idea to the other fragrances, but the Frederic Malle is a bit more deep. And it's not necessarily all aldehydic, you know, effervescent notes. There's some deeper things happening. Eventually it gets more concentrated and ambery, kind of resinous, leathery when it's drying down. Let me know if you've tried Acne Studios. Do you like it? I know a lot of you were complaining about the name, but probably didn't know that it was another fashion house. So the fourth fragrance we're going to talk about, which also has a flanker, is from the house of Etat Libre Orange. It's Rien. And then, of course, my favorite of the two, Rien Intense Incense. So let's talk about the OG first. I don't know about the OG too much. I've worn it. It's a bit fresher than the other one. And I think both of these have incense, but I feel well, whoa, it's so animalic all of a sudden. I mean, I've worn so much of it. In fact, I prefer this one, and I thought this one was more animalic. But Rien is acting extremely animalic now. Whoa. It's got a lot of leather. It's old school vibes. But the thing is, the one in the black bottle, Intense Incense, gives me a bit of Kouros-like vibes. If you like Kouros, you want something a bit more modern, like a modern recreation of it, try it, because it doesn't have CIVET. Kouros does. It does have leather, an animalic kind of leather, plus the aldehydes. And And Kouros has aldehydes in it as well. But wow, I don't know why I'm reacting so strongly with this Rien. I don't know, has that fragrance gotten concentrated in the bottle? I can't believe that. It's just really intensely animalic. But the one in the black bottle, I love it. Well, this is acting a lot animalic. Maybe it's all the aldehydes that kind of, you know, cleansed my palate somehow, because it is pretty fizzy. This even though these two fragrances have aldehydes, I think the reason they throw in aldehydes in these in this fragrance series, because it's so animalic and dark and smoky, it gives it a little bit of a lift, I suppose. The aldehydes do. Still super strong, super intense, really strong. So let me know if you've tried État Libre d'Orange's Rien and Rien Intense Incense. What are your thoughts? Is it too animalic? The last fragrance I'm going to talk to you about is from the house of Xerjoff. It's Pico Via Dama. So this one takes me back in time to when Guerlain's classic fragrances were, you know, launching. This one gives me the idea of L'Heure Bleue, but in a bit more luxurious way. That's so good. So good. This is musky, it's powdery iris, it's vanillic, it's incensey, but overdosed with aldehydes, and it is so super classy, very elegant. I envision myself going to, really dressed up, going to the opera, and let's say it's the Opera Garnier in Paris. Very like decadent. Like, that place is so gorgeous. It's like a ball, basically. That's the kind of vibes this Pico Via Dama gives me. Oh man. It's been a while since I've smelled it, and I can't believe how good it is, because it does remind me of L'Heure Bleue, and I love L'Heure Bleue, and it's much cheaper than this. This stuff is super elegant. It gives me a champagne kind of vibe because it is effervescent, because it's got the aldehydes. But man, Pico Via Dama, if you love aldehydes and you like those classic Guerlain-esque fragrances like L'Heure Bleue, you got to try Pico Via Dama, man. It is so good. That's definitely, I think I got to do another Xerjoff top 20. That stuff is so amazing, so super delicious. I'm afraid to use too much of it because I find it to be just amazing, you know, like one of the best smells I've put my nose on. And even though it's a bit vintage, it's a bit classic, I find it to be modern, but so super elegant and super classy. All right, so just to let you know, I am pausing the video between some of the notes. So we've done Oakmoss as number 1, aldehydes as number 2, and what's going to be my third vintage note. We're talking about CIVET again. I did do a whole video on CIVET, guys. If you want to find out more about CIVET in fragrances, please go catch that video. But my number 3 vintage note is CIVET. By the way, thanks so much for tuning in today's video. Appreciate you watching this long form deep dive into 10 vintage notes in perfumery. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to the channel by clicking the subscribe button below, and also click the bell icon. And definitely please give a thumbs up to this video so it'll help with the algorithm. All right, so we are talking about CIVET, and I've thrown in 2 vintage or classic fragrances in their current formulations in this category. I just decided to do it because they were used quite a bit back then. Nowadays, CIVET is a synthetic recreation. Most likely, the 2 classic fragrances that I have here are reformulated with synthetic style of CIVET. First is a fragrance that I just bought that I wanted to have in the that I wanted to have in the collection. This is basically Paloma Picasso. This is definitely 80s era shoulder padded ladies fragrance. So I don't know much about this one yet. It's just that I've smelled it and my mom wore it. I'm smelling I'm not smelling CIVET. I'm smelling Lily of the Valley. Is that feature Lily of the Valley? Huh. So I'm smelling something very, very spicy. It's also not loud. Like, it's not screaming. It's a bit subdued. Like, projection-wise, it's sleepy. Not yawning and opening up. But what I'm smelling is quite good. I feel like there's patchouli here. There might even be Oakmoss. Might even be rose. I'm getting a bit of rose. There's something green in here. I thought it was Lily of the Valley. It could also be hyacinth. But it's good. It's really good. This is the EDP. On Wiki Parfum, it says Mon Parfum, but on the bottom it says Eau de Parfum. I don't know if it's focusing. There we go. But let me know if you're a fan of this one for CIVET. Next, this was featured in my CIVET video from the house of Amouage. It's Gold Man. So my bottle didn't say what it is, so I had to write Gold Man under it. Because there's a few bottles that look like this. Oh, it says gold right here. I'm just noticing it for the first time. Right there. Okay. All right. This was a late discovery for me, and it is a CIVET bomb, but it's also a Lily of the Valley bomb. So I discovered it at Neiman Marcus when Neiman Marcus put this fragrance, well, the collection out, and I was, smelling the fragrances, and I had smelled a lot of Amouage before, but this one never crossed my path. It might have, but I had just, quickly done it. But sometimes you have to be in a different place or the right place to smell something, and you react differently. Sometimes in one place I react to a fragrance totally differently and not like it, and in another place totally like it. So there's incidences like this with fragrances, and I should never judge a fragrance so quickly because it happens. One place I don't like it, the environment is different, my chemistry is different. Another place I really like it, the temperature, that has a lot to do with it. This stuff anyway is so amazing, guys. If it's a men's fragrance, it might come off a bit femme because it has Lily of the Valley, but it's overdosed with CIVET. It's very, very musky. It's animalic. It's super awesome. Only thing, once again, not as bad as the Paloma Picasso, but it doesn't seem like it has the projection that I want. Like the Acne Studios, even though it's not animalic, that thing has a lot of projection. The two Etat Libre de Oranges, a lot of projection. The Xerjoff, really awesome projection. But both the Paloma Picasso and the Gold Man seem subdued. Not so much with the Gold Man as much as the Paloma Picasso, but both of them seem a bit subdued. But they both smell great. Between the two, I prefer Gold Man because, oh wow, it's so awesome. And a great representation of CIVET in fragrance. And then this next one was also featured. The rest of the fragrances were featured in the CIVET video. Africa Oliphant from the house of Nishane. Are you familiar with this one? This is a bit challenging. It's so dark and smoky and also leathery, musky, animalic. And oh God, it's really strong. Woo! That one's pretty intense. This is a who's who of animalics. And I'm assuming that still sells because if you caught my deep dive into Nishane recently, I did a video of Nishane fragrances. I think there was around, how many were there? I'm drawing a blank with the quantity of fragrances. But there's a few that I really enjoy, like Spice Bazaar and Munegu and Passion Choco. Those got discontinued. But I'm assuming there's a clientele for Africa Oliphant. That's why it hasn't been discontinued. But it is a really, really intensely animalic and very, very dark and smoky, leathery fragrance. This is going to be very challenging to wear. I don't know. My tastes are changing. Have you noticed that your tastes change, guys? So when I was first starting to do this, I was so into animalics. Like I was wearing a lot of animalics way before I started even wearing white florals. But lately, animalics are a bit overwhelming. Really, but this, I mean, I love what they've done with it, but I just don't think I could wear it. I think it's the smokiness that's turning me off. And even though this Gold Man is quite animalic, I really love to wear that. But Nishane's Africa Oliphant, whew, it's super intense. Then we've got the House of Jean Desprez and it's Bala Versailles. Are you guys familiar with this? So apparently this was Michael Jackson's favorite fragrance. I don't know how true this is. I always mention it. I don't know. This is a reformulation. The originals were really, really great. And I've smelled the parfum of this at the Fragrance Vault in South Lake Tahoe. Heavenly. But if you can't get yourself a bottle of the original formulation or the parfum concentration in the original formulation, I do have an alternative for it. It's called Salome from the House of Papillon Perfumery. Not identical, but very similar style to me, and that stuff is amazing. This is actually doable. It's not as animalic as it used to be, I guess. But it's nice. It's ambery. It's lots of balsamic resins and amber in here. The funk is under there. It's kind of hidden. I thought this was much more animalic. I only bought my bottle in the latter part of the 2010s, I believe. I think I saw these also selling at Harrods upstairs in the salon in the area with the Raja Parfums fragrances are. I saw it there. I smelled it there, and that's around the time I bought myself a bottle. I think it's a good fragrance, actually. It's totally wearable because it's not overwhelming like the Nishane. It's passable for sure, and it's got a little funk. It's not like a overly animalic fragrance. And then the last fragrance in this CIVET category is Musk Tonkin, which also was featured in the CIVET video. So Parfum D'Empire is a really great house. Fragrances are created by Marc-Antoine Corticchiato. One of my favorite ambers, Ambre Rousse, is from this house. I've got to move the Paloma Picasso bottle because I keep knocking it. It's right in front there, and it's like... But this stuff is a Chypre style rose and patchouli I'm getting under there with a lot of civet. There's also aldehydes and leather in here, but it's very daring, but once again wearable, unlike the Nishane. But between the Bala Versailles and the Parfum D'Empire Musk Tonkin, did I say the name correct? Yeah, Musk Tonkin. The Musk Tonkin is a lot more animalic. But also, I feel like you can layer the Musk Tonkin with the Bala Versailles to give the Bala Versailles a bit of kick. The only thing is, the Bala Versailles is more balsamic and ambery, resinous. And I think the Parfum D'Empire is a bit sour. Like there's a tartness about it. But still really awesome scent. I'm not complaining about the tartness because I like tart fragrances. And I feel like there's a rosy Chypre effect happening in there. And that's what's giving us this vibe. Really awesome scent. Now, as I said, there is a CIVET video on the channel. Go catch that video. That's Musk Tonkin, the last fragrance in the CIVET category. So we're going to move over to number 4, Vintage Perfume Note. And I do have to let you know, I've got up to 7 notes here. So after the 7th note is done, I'm going to pause the video and then come back to remove all the fragrances and put new fragrances. So we have 50 fragrances here total. So the next note, vintage note that I consider vintage is Narcissus. Now you might not agree with me on this one, but I think they were trying to make Narcissus a thing again in the early 2020s, especially with the next 2 fragrances I'm going to talk to you about. But I don't think I see a lot of Narcissus in fragrances. It used to be a more featured note. What are your thoughts on Narcissus? Let me know. Add a comment below. And also, it was a little difficult to find some fragrances featuring Narcissus, but I found 5. One of them is sadly a very limited release, but in the most gorgeous bottle. I'll show you that when we get to it. But the first fragrance I'm going to talk to you about is Narcisse Taiji from the house of Atelier Materi, which is right there. Are you guys familiar with this one? So I really like this one. It's green. It's musky, it's powdery, a bit minerally, and I think it has more indie niche similarities to the mass market H24, which is the next fragrance I'm going to talk to you about. If you like H24 and its greenness, you might graduate to niche if you like niche fragrances and try Narcisse Taiji. It's a very, very cool fragrance. Really like it. It's got an ice cold quality about it, but there's leather, there's some fruity notes under there, there's musk, some patchouli, and I like its greenness. There's slight hay-like qualities here as well. This one doesn't get animalic, and from what I've heard, Narcissus can get animalic, especially if it's the paper white variety of Narcissus, which I think it's in the same family. That stuff has a very indolic smell, but what we have here is not that. And the next fragrance, as I said, is H24 from Hermes. They have the third fragrance in the series now, which is a fruity version of this. And H24 is also Narcissus. It's also clean and green and fruity, because I think they have pear in the notes here, or something pear-like. Although I think it's in the third flanker, they have the pear granita, but I'm picking up the pear in here as well. So it's Narcissus with clary sage, I believe, and there's some molecular notes in here. It's a great fresh fragrance. I like the H24 series quite a bit. I don't think they're very beefy fragrances. They're not super strong, but I think they're really nicely done. Simplistic, clean, green leaning. I like that series a lot. Let me know your thoughts on the Hermes H24 series. So I think the next one, sadly, I think is discontinued, but I don't have a lot of Narcissus in this studio. And it is a bit on the vintage side, I think, this note. But this is L'Artisan Parfumeur's Mont de Narcisse. This series was a really great series. I think the one that survived in this series is the one that Quentin Biche has created. The one about... what's the name? It'll come to me. But they also have one based on the Camargue. They had one of these on the lavender area of I think it was the lavender region in France. This is going leathery, this Mont de Narcisse. But yeah, the one that Quentin Biche did is the Mandarin Corsica. So it's a Mandarin inspired, Corsica inspired fragrance. Here, it's not anything like the previous two. This is more of a daring variety of Narcissus, especially since they've combined it with leather. You can really pick up the leather, but it doesn't get animalic. But I wouldn't say this is like a mass market kind of fragrance. It's not typically conventional. It's also a bit savory, not necessarily a lot of sweetness here. So it's an acquired taste kind of a thing, but it's not unwearable kind of a thing also, if that makes sense to you guys. So that's it. That's Mont de Narcisse. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. I think it is discontinued, sadly. And then this next one is from the house of Roberto Greco. Roque, I think that's how you say it. This bottle is gorgeous, guys. Absolutely love it. So this is the third Roberto Greco fragrance. I actually know the guy. He's an artist, and he has done 3 different fragrances with 3 different perfumers. First one was with Marc-Antoine Corticchiato of Parfum D'Empire. I have a review of it. The second was created by Rodrigo Flores Roux. I have a review of it. I don't have a review of this one on the channel, but I bought this, and it was some of the last bottles at Jovoy. So I'm actually just safekeeping this one because this to me is the best of the 3. The first is, they're both kind of animalic in different fragrances, but the second is my least favorite. The second is also very aldehydic, which could have been featured here in the aldehydic section. But you can totally smell the Narcissus here. Totally. And this is the animalic variety. This is actually also created by Christopher Sheldrake of Serge Lutens. And I have a video on the channel with him and the lady that he's partnered with to create fragrances for Sputurno. But he did such a good job on this one. It's such an awesome fragrance. You can actually smell the daffodils, which are the Narcissus, but in their raw form. Like, if you've ever smelled them, I'm the type of person that smells flowers and plants all the time. If I see them, I'll smell them just to see what they smell like. And this smells like the real thing, but with all the vegetation around it. There's a very earthy quality about this. It's so delicious. So awesome. I can't believe it's such a great fragrance that Christopher Sheldrake has done. I don't know if this is something that they would launch. Well, maybe it is something they could launch at Serge Lutens, which Christopher Sheldrake has done a lot of fragrances for. Maybe even Sputurno. But I completely see his signature here. Wow. That stuff is awesome, guys. If you haven't tried this, I don't know how you would get it, but I think what Roberto Greco does with these fragrances, there's only 500 and they're numbered. So, do I have my bottle box here? Let's see. I put all my boxes behind all these bottles. Yeah, there's 500 and it says 309. So that's the number I have. But I bought this and they told me at Javoy that you have the last bottles or something like that. There's a little magazine inside explains the creation of the fragrance and things like that. And there's little photos in there as well. So if I didn't say it, Roberto Greco is an artist and he does a lot of print type of artwork. So he's really good at that kind of stuff. So I'm so happy that I was able to find it because I didn't take advantage of getting it. But I had received a sample of that when Roberto was working on it. And I think it smells even better out of the bottle in comparison to the sample. So I didn't react so positively to the sample, but the fragrance is awesome. It's Roque. I think that's how you say it. All right, the last fragrance I'm going to talk to you about in this Narcissus category is Givenchy Gentleman Society. Yeah, this is another collection that's utilizing the Narcissus note. So it was Gentleman, and then all of a sudden Givenchy changed it to Society, Gentleman Society. I think it's a decent scent, but I just recently smelled the Extreme and I like it. And the Amber is also really good. So I might have to do an updated video on the 3 fragrances in the future. We'll see. But it's a bit warm, ambery. It doesn't pay tribute to the Narcissus as much because I feel like it's hidden inside all the other notes that are in here. There's a lot of woods here. There's some sweet notes and ambery type notes as well. And spices for sure. Yeah, it doesn't really... I don't get a lot of the daffodil or Narcissus come up too much. But I think it's pleasant. Let me know if you're a fan of this. Gentleman Society. There's also Gentleman Society Extreme, I think. And then there's the Amber that just came out. All right, we've got 2 more notes on the table. So we're going to do 5 and 6. And then I'm going to have to pause the video and then switch everything out and bring out the next 3 notes and go through those and then wrap up the video. But the next note we're talking about, which I consider a vintage note, is Carnation. What do you guys think? Now, Carnation, I think, is trying to make a bit of a comeback, but I think it's a very old school note. Carnation, to me, also smells a bit like cloves, but in a floral way. I really love the smell of carnation or cloves. I think the flower is one of the most fragrant, but it's a very warm smell rather than a creamy like the white flowers or, you know, indolic and things like that. It's a very spicy, warm smell to me. But the first fragrance I'm going to talk to you, these are sadly mostly classics here because I couldn't find a lot of carnation featured today. And I think the one that really stands out that I didn't highlight, I don't think it's selling anymore. Maybe it's selling in France. It's from the house of YSL. It's Jazz. That's like where I'm talking about carnation. I'm talking about coriander. Sorry, scratch that. We'll get to that in a little bit. Carnation is not YSL coriander, Jazz coriander. But first fragrance I'm going to talk to you about in the carnation category is Jaipur Homme and EDP. Total warm, spicy fragrance that I think it smells pretty darn good today. What do you guys think? I love this. There's a lot of cinnamon. The carnation blends really beautifully with the cinnamon because it's got those clove-like qualities. There's a lot of amber notes here, vanillic notes. Super yummy amber style fragrance with a lot of warm spices, but in a classic way. I remember the first time I smelled this, and I remember where I smelled it. I smelled it at Macy's. And the Macy's associate gave me a ton of samples just to try. And I remember spritzing this on without even buying the bottle with the samples that I had received. And I'm really drooling over the way it smells. It doesn't have that intensity as that did back in the 90s. Those fragrances were super potent, even in eau de toilette. Although it might have been the eau de parfum that she gave me. But whatever it was super, super potent. And this is the eau de parfum, and it doesn't have that intensity I remember. Like it, once you got on your skin, it would stay there for the whole day, if not into the next day. But getting past that, even though this is reformulated, I consider it a really, really awesome fragrance. It was also created by Annick Monardo. Just around the time she did this, she also did Boss Bottle, the OG, the cinnamon and apples. Hey, this one has cinnamon too. So maybe she was going through a phase. Around that time, she also did Bulgari Black, which is actually tea and leather. But that woman has created some awesome fragrances, by the way. She's a great perfumer, and this is definitely one of the best out there. If you haven't tried Jaipur Homme EDP, do try it. The next one I'm talking about is an Estee Lauder classic feminine fragrance called Spellbound. This is in the newer bottle, obviously. This is not the vintage bottle. So you can totally smell the carnation here, but I feel like it's swimming in a lot of creamy white floral notes. There's vanillic notes in here also, and spices. There's a slight fruitiness there, but totally gives me like a floral bouquet with the warmth and intensity of carnation. I think it's a solid offering. It might be a bit subdued. I think that's what happens with a lot of these fragrances that are reformulated. Maybe they just lose their luster. They lose their intensity. I think the fragrance is pretty much there, though. It just doesn't have that oomph. But either way, I think Spellbound is quite gorgeous. You do have that fruitiness there, for sure. So I don't remember actually when Spellbound came out. Was it the early 90s? But this next fragrance from the house of Maître Parfumeur Gantier called Soie Rouge also features carnation, but I thought this was launched in '88 when the brand just launched. They have kept the fragrance in its most intense form. So I don't know what happens with some brands' reformulations, neutering fragrances, and some just keep it very close. Because a lot of the fragrances at Maître Parfumeur Gantier are older fragrances. And so what happens with those reformulations? Don't they neuter the fragrance like other fragrances? I don't know what happens, but maybe it's just something that we have to deal with. But this Soie Rouge is paying tribute to the carnation, but there's a fruity element here, but with also, once again, with floral notes. This is a bit more vintage-esque and a bit sharper in comparison to Spellbound. Spellbound had this kind of a creamy fruitiness. This one has more sharpness and overdosed with a lot of spices, the sharp spices, which I'm assuming is something like the carnation that's giving us that. There's also, whoa, this to me smells very vintage, but in a good way. Spellbound smelled vintage, even though it smelled good. I felt like it was lacking something, if that makes sense. But super fantastic. This also has a fruitiness. It's, whoa. I'm smelling some stone fruits, like fruits in this. But once again, compare Soir Rouge to Spellbound. Oops, my cap. There we go. They, like, the way they wear or the way they smell is night and day different. So what have they done to Spellbound that they haven't done to Soir Rouge from Maître Parfum et Gantier? It's an awesome scent. Very warm. Very, very spicy. So the next fragrance, we're going to the house of Parfums D'Empire. This is Sacre Bleu. Is that how you say it in French? So I don't know much about this one. We will talk about it right now. Ooh, this is very, very old school. This is very warm ambery. So I like ambery fragrances that have the warm spices, the cinnamons and cloves and nutmeg. They really blend really wonderfully together. This is what's going on with the carnation in this. I feel like all of these fragrances that I'm smelling, not only do they have carnation, they also have cinnamon. Yeah. Really warm, spicy fragrances. Every single one that I've smelled here is warm, spicy, which is kind of cool. I love this style of fragrance. Warm, spicy fragrances are some of my favorites. Wow, that's really good. Both of these vintage style fragrances, Maître Parfum et Gantier, Soir Rouge, and Sacre Bleu from the house of Parfums D'Empire. Really awesome carnation offerings. And I think these two brands launched around the same time. Didn't they launch in the 80s? I know Maître Parfum et Gantier launched in 88. I could have sworn that Parfums D'Empire launched in 86. Or was it 89? And the last fragrance I'm going to talk to you about, which I just did a video on, is Tabac Blonde from the house of Caron. Do you guys know this one? Now, even though it's a leather fragrance with, in the old days, utilizing castoreum, this also utilized a lot of carnation to give you that kind of warm, spicy depth. It's also very ambery. If you want to find out more about this fragrance, go catch my full review. It's part of the Caron series of Tabac fragrances. And I mentioned in that video that castoreum had a tobacco-ish nuance about it. So I think that's the reason why it's called Tabac, because there's no real tobacco in this. But it's smoky, it's spicy, slightly animalic, very leathery. And of course the carnation is there, giving its warm, spicy effect to the fragrance. It definitely doesn't smell like your traditional tobacco fragrance. It doesn't smell like Tabac Exquis from Caron. It doesn't smell like Tabac Noir. There's also their last remaining tobacco fragrance that I have to get and talk about. Tabac Blanc doesn't smell like that either, I believe. This is a very vintage style fragrance. And somehow carnation category turned out to be very old school, very vintage fragrances. But that stuff is awesome. All of these fragrances that I spoke about in the carnation section, really awesome fragrances, but definitely old school. So let's go to the coriander section. Now I can bring up YSL's Jazz again. YSL's Jazz was a coriander bomb. And again, I don't think it's selling. I know it's not selling in the States. There might be some stock at the discounters. I don't know if it's 100% discontinued everywhere globally, or is it still selling in France? It wasn't in the OG bottles. They had moved it in those square bottles where the M7 was also, and the OG Pour Homme. There was also Rive Gauche Pour Homme in there. So all of that stuff got discontinued, all of it. But I wanted to feature YSL Jazz here because it is a carnation bomb. I decided to leave it out because I'm uncertain what's going on. But the first fragrance is a vintage style or classic fragrance. This is Coriander from the house of Jean Couturier. I'm trying to find a bottle of this fragrance in eau de parfum. This is an eau de toilette, by the way. So this is a Chypre style. Remember I was mentioning Chypre style. It reminded me of Ylang 49 and also another fragrance. But this, it utilizes the coriander, but there's also Oakmoss here. Are you guys familiar with this? Oh yeah. It reminds me of a sort of lighter take on Aromatics Elixir. For sure, it reminds me of the Ylang 49. It's mossy, but also very spicy and a bit green. And that's what I like about coriander. Oh my God. The cilantro, the herb itself, I don't like the smell of that much. It's the seeds that is where the magic is. If you've ever had anybody roast them or toast them, not roast them, toast them, oh man, just take a pan out and throw a couple of seeds, not a couple, maybe like 10, 20. Just roast them a little bit, toast them a little bit. Oh man, you get very fragrant smell in the whole kitchen. And I love the smell of coriander seeds, not the cilantro myself. I at one time, I hated the smell and taste of cilantro. Growing up here in California, there's a lot of Mexican restaurants and Mexican food. Now I love cilantro in food. I don't seek it out because I still don't like the smell as much. I can tolerate it, but it's like night and day difference between the seeds and the herb itself. But here, as I said, it's a Chypre style. It is very eau de toilette. It's very fresh. I wish I had an eau de parfum of this. It has been neutered down for sure. But you definitely experience the coriander with the mossy notes that are in there to give you that whole Chypre style. But the next fragrance is called Coriander from the house of DS and Durga. This, to me, is a slightly barbershop-y style fragrance utilizing coriander. It might have some light similarities to, what is it called? Jazz by YSL. But I love that whole freshness. So coriander has a kind of a very, because the seed smells a bit flowery and spicy at the same time. And I'm getting that here perfectly. This is a really awesome fragrance. It's very invigorating. It's spicy and herbal and aromatic, but very fresh and clean. For sure, barbershop-y. I think it's a great classy masculine offering. And even though it's a unisex offering, coriander, with the fact that it has these kind of herbal, aromatic, spicy notes, totally leans masculine for me. If you are looking for something that's coriander forward, you like barbershop-y style fragrances, you love the spices and things like that, definitely try coriander. I think it's great. Okay, the next fragrance, there's two of them because there's a flanker of one, is the fragrance L'air du Desert Marocain from the house of Tower Perfumes. And of course, Accour de Desert from the same house. The Accour de Desert is a extrait de parfum concentration. The OG is an eau de toilette. And of course, it utilizes a lot of coriander, which is kind of makes this fragrance, even though it's an amber, but very dry amber, it freshens up the fragrance because it's an amber. Amber is usually warm, so it freshens up the fragrance and makes it not as warm and the type of ambers that go warm, balsamic, resinous, and things like that. Even though you have that here, I think the coriander, plus there's petitgrain here, gives it that kind of green freshness that you get from those kind of notes. But let's smell the EDT, because the EDT is what put the brand on the map. That's the fragrance that put the brand on the map. And let me know if you guys are familiar with this house. Add a comment below. This is the house of Tower Perfumes. There's something so unique about this smell that I absolutely love. And I don't pull for it too much anymore. It was a time I was talking a lot about it. But now that I'm putting my nose to it, it is such an awesome scent. Such an awesome scent. One of the best fragrances ever created, hands down. So unique, dry, dusty, amber, spicy, balsamic, resinous, plus those green, aromatic, vegetal kind of spicy, citrusy notes that are up top. So super cool. If you haven't tried L'Air du Désert Marocain, you are missing out. Please try it. I think it's a great scent. And then I have two more. We've got a fragrance from Nishane called Papilefiko, which utilizes the note of coriander. So this one, to me, I feel like the coriander is not so stand out. It's nicely blended together. It enhances and gives the fragrance the aromatic spiciness that the coriander seeds has or supplies. To me, it's interesting. The cilantro itself is an herb, but the seeds, to me, are spices. They're kind of different, right? But it comes from an herb, because cilantro is an herb. But yeah, it's here. I think this is a fragrance that I wasn't too much of a fan of before. It has grown on me, and I feel like it's a great elevated take on something mass market from a niche house. And the way it smells, it would garner compliments, I think. Because I think once it's blended with your chemistry and the fragrance projects off of you, you should definitely get people talking about your scent. But I don't consider it a true coriander scent. I put it here because I couldn't find any other coriander fragrances. And so it's there, but it doesn't totally stand out like other coriander fragrances. Like the L'Air du Désert Marocain is super coriander-y, if that makes sense. Last fragrance is from the house of 4711. It's called Aqua Colonia Intense, Awakening Woods of Scandinavia. I have recommended this one so much. It was actually recommended to me by a follower of mine. I bought it. Really love it. I have a backup of it. It's also very fresh and clean and green. And it's utilizing coriander, among other greenish kind of aromatic, spicy, woody notes. There's fir here. There's bergamot. But it's so good. You can totally smell the coriander in this. It's got that slightly floral, spicy herbalness that you have from the coriander, nicely blended with a lot of other aromatic, herbal, spicy, woody notes. It also leans masculine, but a woman can totally pull it off. It's very, very woody. It's created by Geza Schoen, by the way. He does the fragrances for Eccentric Molecules, and I believe he's done fragrances for Ormonde Jayne, or used to, but a great creation. Just keep in mind, it's not like a beast mode fragrance. This is an eau de cologne. It's actually an eau de cologne intense. That's why it's called Aqua Colonia Intense. So this is not something that's going to last you all day. You're going to have to replenish. But these bottles are also bigger. I think this is 150 ml. And this is 170 ml. That's what it says right there. And that's, you're going to have to replenish because it's not something that lasts a long time. Anyway, so we're at the end of coriander. We have four more. I guess we have four more notes to do. And I'm going to pause the video now and then come back after the table is redone. All right, so I've cleared the table. Now I've set up the rest of the fragrances here. And we've got 20 more fragrances to go over. 4 different notes. And I've got my notes here just to make sure I have them in the correct order. So when I put the information in the info box on YouTube, the timestamps will be correct. All right, so the 7th vintage note I'm going to talk to you about today happens to be Lily of the Valley. Let me know if you agree with me. Lily of the Valley is used these days. It's not as often. I do consider it a bit classic, but the way I did this ranking, my number one most vintage note was the Oakmoss, as I said, and I just went down. And the one that's closest to 10 or number 10 is not as vintage because it's still being used, but still, I think it was used in the old days, and we'll talk about them individually. So the first ones I spoke about are more vintage notes in comparison to the latter. But we are talking about Lily of the Valley now. And the first fragrance I'm going to talk to you about is Dior's Diorissimo. You guys familiar with this one? I believe this is an Edmond Rudnitska creation. And absolutely a gorgeous fragrance. I believe Lily of the Valley is a fantasy note, and it doesn't, it's not something you can extract. So they recreate the smell utilizing other floral notes, most likely, and other notes together. But super fresh, super green, super floral. This is like an overdose of a bouquet of Lily of the Valley. I was so fortunate to have spent one day in France on a May Day, which is when they sell this flower. And I got to experience the flowers and their smell and all that kind of stuff. And to me, this is the flower come alive in this fragrance. Now, we're going to talk about 5 different fragrances that features the Lily of the Valley, but I consider Diorissimo to be the ultimate Lily of the Valley fragrance. If you like Lily of the Valley with some additional things thrown in there, I suggest you get a bottle because, again, it's so fresh, clean. It's a bit citrusy to me because there's some tartness there, but it's white flowers, but on the green side, it's so fresh. It reminds me of spring flowers. All right, the next one is called Lily from the house of Comme des Garçons. So Comme des Garçons' Lily is part of the green series, but it was discontinued, and then they moved it into the olfactory library, as you can see right there. But I think they modernized the idea of Diorissimo in this in a kind of a Comme des Garçons way. This to me also smells like there's a lot more happening. It's not necessarily just the flowers, whereas with Diorissimo, to me it just smells like the flowers. Like they brought the flowers to life in a perfume form. Here with Lily by Comme des Garçons, I'm getting a lot of the stems here. So it cuts away from the dominantization of just the flowers, if that makes sense. And you still smell the flowers, but there's other green things in here that take it away from being an uber floral fragrance. But once again, it's super green. I think the vegetation is what I'm trying to say. So there's vegetation type notes in here, which is creating the greenness. But it's, once again, smells like spring vegetation, spring flowers, very fresh, clean, green. Awesome stuff. Really awesome. I think Lily of the Valley might be associated with, I don't want to use the word, but typically people say that smells like grandma or that smells like grandpa. I don't think it does, personally. I love Lily of the Valley. I grew up with a mom that loves flowers and a dad who gardened. So I grew up with a lot of vegetables and herbs and fruits and flowers and you name it. So that's kind of left an impression on me, I believe. That's why I like flowers. That's why I like the smell of vegetation and things. So I'm not going to talk about that one because I think I just did it out of order. This is the one I'm going to talk about. The next one is a fragrance from the house of Frederic Malle. It's Synthetic Nature. Now, I haven't used my Synthetic Nature as much as I've used my Synthetic Jungle. Once again, Frederic Malle spraying like there's no tomorrow. I love those sprayers. They spray so good. But Synthetic Jungle was renamed Synthetic Nature. To me, this is even taking that vegetation idea even further. We've got the Lily of the Valley in Synthetic Nature, or if you have Synthetic Jungle, but they've thrown in stuff in here that smells of the vegetation chopped up. Synthetic Nature also reminds me a little bit of L'Ombre dans l'eau from the house of Diptyque. Diptyque's has cassis, I believe. I can't remember if this has cassis. Do you remember if... But I don't think it has rose. I think the Diptyque also has rose. I don't think the Synthetic Jungle or Nature has rose, but I think it has the cassis from what I remember. But it's an awesome green fragrance. Really love it. And it smells like spring again, but also it could smell like cold rain on a humid jungle with a lot of green vegetation. That's what I get. For me, we have an arboretum here in San Francisco that I've been to many times, and I went just after Synthetic Jungle had launched. And even though there's no fragrance of the vegetation, I got that humid experience because it's kind of kept temperature controlled. It's kind of warm in there. And it gave me the idea of this fragrance. But as I said, that place doesn't have fragrance, but I'm assuming if the vegetation in this humid place had a fragrance, this is how it would smell after there was a really cold rain when it's hot and humid out. That's what I get with Synthetic Nature. It's an awesome scent. But let's talk about the next fragrance, which is Cavatina. Cavatina from the house of Parfums d'Ucita, utilizing the note of Lily of the Valley. This to me has some warmth under there, but super green. It's also a bit green citrusy. Cavatina has a tartness, so I feel like, I think just Lily of the Valley in general, if it's like focusing on it, I get a tartness from it. Maybe they throw in a citrus type note that creates this, or maybe since it's an accord, maybe they're throwing in certain notes that creates this. But this fragrance also, there's a juicy tartness about it. And it's not just Lily of the Valley. There's a lot of things in here. I feel like there's rose here. I feel like there's other white flowers. There's citruses for sure. Very, very fresh. But there's also a bit of warmth under there. Under there, there's some slight warmth that kind of contrasts with the freshness of all the fresh ingredients. It's a great fragrance, but to me, the one that's super pure Lily of the Valley is Diorissimo. It's like in your face. And I believe I reported about a very exclusive fragrance that Dior is launching in this beautiful bottle with this kind of like Lily of the Valley gold thingy coming out of it, which I think was going to sell for around $1,300. I think it's a Lily of the Valley focused fragrance. Muguet is basically the name in the French. And also, I believe Guerlain has a limited edition Muguet fragrance as well in the gorgeous bottle. But yeah, Cavatina to me seems a bit more complex and a lot more going on instead of just Lily of the Valley. But Synthetic Nature was all green, leaning green, but utilizing the Lily of the Valley. And last but not least, I want to talk to you about Malamata, a Dominic Ripion created fragrance. And I guess it's an award winner. And this was also featured in a kit last summer, I believe it was. Yeah, last year's summer. And we do have some of the fragrances left in our store as well, if you like the green Lily of the Valley. But once again, this to me does have a little bit of the touches of Synthetic Jungle. But this one doesn't remind me of L'Ombre dans l'eau, whereas Synthetic Jungle, Synthetic Nature does. This is much more fresh, but also this gives me the idea a little bit of tomato leaves. Such a good scent, guys. I think this is so good in the heat. I have some of the samples that I take around with me because we have some of the samples left. And I love the way this smells, really do. It's very fresh and green and very invigorating. It's like this boost of energy, uplifting energy, because it's happy. Happy green synth, spring kind of essence and things like that. So lovely. Malamata is just gorgeous. But once again, it's not like, you might get traces of Diorissimo, but there's a lot more going on in there in comparison to Diorissimo, which to me is paying tribute to that gorgeous Lily of the Valley smell. Okay, next, so that was number 7, Lily of the Valley or Muguet. Next is Violet. So Violet is used quite a bit nowadays, but I feel like it was a very vintage note. And we've got some Violet fragrances here that I want to highlight. First of which is a men's fragrance from the house of Brioni. It's Brioni EDP. Are you guys familiar with this one? Now, Violet was used in the men's fragrance Fahrenheit, but this is a very modern fragrance launched during the height of the pandemic in 2021. I feel like it's a very classy, violet fragrance, but I feel like they're using not only the violet flowers here, they're also using the leaves, which are different smell profiles. To me, the violets provide this kind of a violet candy, powdery thing. It's used quite a bit in fragrances that make the perfumers make to smell like makeup. But here, there's a crisp, fruity crunch about it, like apples. And I think we're getting that from the violet leaves note. Still powdery, but super classy. This might remind you a little bit of Fahrenheit. A little bit. You know, there's similarities because it's the violet leaves once again. But super classy. I think it's a very classy, elegant men's scent from a designer. I really love the Brioni fragrances for men. Really, I think they do an awesome job. Most of them are created by Michel Almerac, who actually created Fahrenheit with a few other perfumers. So there you go. I guess he's using the similar note. So the next fragrance is a Violet Bomb from the house of Frederic Malle. It's Dante Bras, created by Maurice Roussel. So Maurice Roussel's 3 fragrances for Frederic Malle. I love Musk Ravageur #1, Dante Bras #2, a distant #2, and Uncut Gem, even a further distant #3. This is, like, you can really smell the violets. Super powdery. This doesn't get ozonic like Brioni does with the violet leaves, but super powdery and musky. But this doesn't have that makeup thing I was talking about. It doesn't smell like makeup. It smells very musky. There's aromatic, spicy notes coming in. I feel like there's a bit of amber and woods in there as well. And I'm saying it's powdery, but sometimes powder is associated with makeup powder. This is not that. I think we're getting the powderiness from the fact that violets are powdery as a note, and also musk can get powdery, so it becomes powdery. But there's a lot of denseness here, and there's other things going on. It's a pretty intense fragrance. Complex is another word. But the next fragrance is from the house of Maison Violet. This is Purpur d'Automne. So the bottles have changed now for this brand, sadly. Their new bottles are a bit more modern. This actually, sadly, it's a very easy bottle to tip. So thankfully it was in further up. Otherwise my body would have tipped it. But this is a Violet Bomb for sure. And actually the brand has a really great soap also made with this fragrance. This to me smells like violet candy. If you've ever had violet candy, this is it. This totally smells like it. It's sweet, it's powdery, candied. There's a tea brand from France called Mariage Frère, which I'm obsessed with. I love their teas. One time I was there, I bought a canister of violet flavored tea. I don't know if they still make it, but I drank almost 3/4 of all of that tea, and then I got tired of it. I'm like, I'm not drinking any more violet tea. This just totally reminds me of that. Uber candied violets. You know, another thing that violets are used are in leathery fragrances, which I'm assuming it's the next one. No, the one after that. Let's do this next one. This next one is from the house of Chanel. It's Missia. So I have a eau de parfum bottle I bought when Chanel did their thing at the department stores with all those posters. Thankfully, I have a poster from that event. They gave me one. I think that's what the promotion was. But also, before that, I ended up with an eau de toilette of Missia. I also have an eau de toilette of number 18. Thankfully, somebody was selling them, so for a collector. But the eau de parfum is not bad. This one to me is almost like the violet candy effect, but also the powdery makeup effect together. Whereas the Purpur d'Automne, purpur I think means purple. Well, violets are purple, obviously. So autumn purple. So this to me, like I said, it's violet candy and makeup all rolled into one in a Chanel way. It's so powdery. I think there's also iris in here, and that's the thing. Iris, rose, violets together, you get this kind of a makeup effect, maybe lipstick effect, face powder effect. And this is a very Chanel fragrance, really like Chanel style. Let me know if you're a fan of this one. This was my late discovery from Chanel. I mean, I've known about it for a while, but I just bought it like, was it last year? I think I bought it the year before from Neiman Marcus. And the last violet fragrance I'm going to talk about comes in a violet colored bottle. It's called Cuirissime. What do you guys think of this bottle? From the house of J.U.S. They're finally selling over at So Avant-Garde. I love this bottle. I love this kind of, it's almost like a funky, playful apothecary kind of bottle. I love that about it. It's also a refillable bottle, as you can see. But this one's candied violets with leather. It's Cuirissime. Yep. It does have a bit of Tuscan leather vibe, but the violets are overdosed, which is what's providing the fruitiness, I think. I think it's a really great scent. And the bottle is, I think, really gorgeous. As you can see right there, it says Cuirissime. I don't know why my camera is not focusing. But let me know if you've tried J.U.S. Let me know if you enjoy violets. Add a comment below. And let's move on to the next category. We've got 2 more categories left. We're talking about Mysore Sandalwood. So the reason I picked this note here, I don't think they use much Mysore Sandalwood anymore. And I actually gave my mom a bottle of Samsara in 1990 or 91, I think 90. Yeah, I've got my dates down. And I think that utilized Mysore Sandalwood. But I do have 5 fragrances that use Mysore Sandalwood, which I'm assuming it's not the real Mysore Sandalwood. But the first one is back to Chanel again. It's Bois d'Ile. And this one, I thought sandalwood was supposed to be creamier. This fragrance, I don't get much of that creamy sandalwood texture that I like. This is also very Chanel. Very Chanel. There's aldehydes in here or something Chanel DNA. But it's good. For sure it's good. It's not my favorite sandalwood, but it's quite good. This one I've had, because I used to talk a lot about Chanel fragrances and people would say, well, you never talk about Bois d'Ile. So I got it. I've worn quite a bit of it. I've actually given half of it to a friend. But there's so many fragrances here. To me, it's got a very vintage vibe in a Chanel way. Maybe a little bit in a Guerlain way as well. But I've grown to enjoy this more, even further, the longer it sits. I think in the bottle it's aging nicely and maturing and smelling great. But let me know about this fragrance, Bois d'Ile. Are you a fan? And let me know if you like the idea of Mysore Sandalwood. We're going to the house of Xerjoff once again. This is Richwood. So even though Richwood does have that reminder of Chanel's Coromandel, it does have quite a bit of Mysore Sandalwood, according to my research. I did my research on Wiki Parfum, by the way. Again, I recommend this place. I'm not sponsored by them. I like it there because it seems more like a database in comparison to the other places, which seems more social. And I did a search for Mysore Sandalwood, and these fragrances were listed there. But even though this gives me the idea of Coromandel, they are so different. I feel like Richwood is a nice balance of the sandalwood, the Mysore Sandalwood, and the patchouli together. And I think it's the sandalwood in this that's giving us the creamy effect, whereas the Chanel is patchouli, benzoin, and I believe sandalwood or some other note that's in there that's giving us that whole... It's a toss-up. I really love this for the combo of sandalwood and patchouli, but I really love the Chanel for the patchouli. But it's a gorgeous scent. If you haven't tried Richwood, try it. It's a luxurious take on Coromandel. I'm at the very end of my next fragrance from the house of Maison Parfum. No, Maison Francis Kurkdjian is what I should say. This is Aqua Vitae Forte. This also utilizes Mysore sandalwood. And this, and along with Aqua Universalis Forte, were two of my favorite early on niche fragrances, the Forte editions. I've never worn the OG editions of those. And I felt like the Aqua Vitae Forte was a deep take on something solar floral. I think it utilizes Ylang Ylang. You get that effect here. And then, of course, it's got that creamy sandalwood in the base, so it has a very creamy effect. But it is a freshie in the end. It's not necessarily a deep fragrance. But, you know, it has some deeper notes there because it is the Forte edition. But really wonderful and cozy and definitely solar, floral, a bit tropical. The Ylang is pretty pronounced. I was going to go with Ylang Ylang as well as a note, but I think it's used quite a bit now, so I left it off. I would assume Ylang Ylang would have been like number 11 or 12. But the next Mysore... But the next Mysore sandalwood fragrance happens to be Tam Dao from the house of Diptyque. Let me know if you're a fan of this. You know, it's a really gorgeous fragrance. It's a bit boring. I wanted a little more. But if you want a Mysore sandalwood fragrance, this is really like a great fragrance. To me, it smells creamy and also flaky. Like it has chopped woods, shaved woods kind of smell together with the creaminess of the sandalwood. But it's realistic. It smells real. I don't know if they're using the real thing, but to me, it smells like the real thing, which makes it a pleasure to wear. Tam Dao is awesome. This is the EDP edition. They have it in Eau de Toilette as well, which is a lot fresher. Gorgeous image on the back there with the elephant. And the last Mysore sandalwood fragrance I'm going to talk to you about is from the house of Argos. It's Danae. You guys familiar with this? I did a video on Argos fragrances, and this one turned out to be my favorite. What do I like about this one? The fact that it has patchouli, and I love that about it. It's super sexy. But also, I love the Mysore sandalwood in here. It's quite prominent. Does it smell like Richwood? No. They're also utilizing patchouli and Mysore sandalwood, but they're so different. This one, to me, Danae, seems a bit candied, which is what I thought was the experience with all three fragrances from Argos that I reviewed. If you haven't caught that video, please go catch it. But I felt this was the least candied in comparison to the other two, and the most patchouli and sandalwood together. Really awesome. And I love this bottle. It's gorgeous. It has that on top there. Not sure why my camera's not focusing. Anyway, so that was note number 9, vintage note number 9. And last but not least, lavender. So by the time this video airs, I probably would have done my lavender harvest experience. I'm headed to the south of France near Grasse, and I'll share some images and content and see if I can get some content with the producers and the harvesters. Lavender is a note that they've used for a long time. Remember, Fougère Royale in its original form launched in the late 1800s. Houbigan's Fougère Royale was reformulated in 2010, but the OG is from the late 1800s. Fougère means fern, and they were trying to replicate or create a scent that, if ferns had a smell, yeah, they have a smell, but it's not strong, right? This is what it would smell like, and I think they did a great job. And Fougères have been popular for a long time, and of course, they've been around for a long time. Fougère fragrances smell awesome. I love them. I grew up with them through my dad. I started wearing them. Drakkar Noir was one of my favorite fragrances in the 80s. I went through 4 bottles in the 80s. 4 as a teenager, guys. 4 bottles. Anyway, I'm not featuring that fragrance here, but we're going to start off with the reformulation of Fougère Royale, the reformulation from 2010. I think it's a classic men's fragrance, really classy. It's just a bit of creaminess in here, and it's not just lavender. They also have clary sage and geranium. Of course, tonka beans or coumarin in the base notes, which is typical for a Fougère fragrance. But it's green. It spicy. It's spicy from not only spices, but also the aromatics create a spiciness. But definitely really awesome. I actually own both the EDP, as you can see, and the Parfum. Somebody was asking recently, is it worth it? I don't think it's worth getting the Parfum. There's not much difference except for something that's highly concentrated. But I think the OG is so super awesome. One of the best fougères out there. If you haven't tried it, please do. This next one is also a classic. This one my dad wore, and I've been a fan of it since I started wearing it in the 2000s. This is Pour un Homme de Caron by the House of Caron. I've got 2 Caron fragrances in this video. This actually is the latest edition, and the greenness is no longer green. The formula must have changed because it used to be green. Now it's bluish, kind of like, I don't know, what's the color? For some reason, it reminds me of the winter green. I don't know why. Anyway, the smell is the same to me. Just the color has changed. And it's an awesome fragrance from the 1930s. We've celebrated 90 years last year. And in 2035, this will celebrate 100 years. Is that when it is? No, 2034, I believe. But you know, what's the deal with this? It's a lot of lavender with warm vanillic ambery notes. There's also musky notes in here and probably some additional aromatics. Long-standing fragrance that I think is considered one of the best. It is a fougère style, but it's also warm ambery, so it's not necessarily super fresh because there's that warmth and ambery effect, vanillic effect in the dry down. So the next fragrance is another classic, Jicky from the House of Guerlain. So I started enjoying this fragrance. Actually, really haven't been enjoying it. I never wore this one ever before. I actually featured it in a CIVET video. It's a classic Guerlain fragrance. This is the latest incarnation. Obviously here it's an eau de parfum concentration. It's a fougère style, and I believe originally this was a woman's target. I think it might still be a woman's targeted. But I think a Wiki Parfum said it was unisex. So it's a fougère style to me, but kind of aldehydic. I get a bit of a Chanel Aldehydes DNA vibe in this, but as I was saying earlier, I thought the, which fragrance was it? The Missia? The Bois d'Ile, I think, is what I said was giving me Guerlain vibes. Even the fragrance Le Lion gives me Shalimar vibes. So I think rivals for sure. But it's a good release. I think it's a really solid release. It is very old school retro-ish smelling, the current formulation. It doesn't smell as modern as Fougère Royale. It doesn't smell as modern as Pour un Homme de Caron either. I don't know why. But Jicky is awesome. Check it out. The next fragrance is a very modern fougère. It's Lavande 31 from the House of Le Labo. Are you guys familiar with this one? I love the way this smells. I've complained about how weak and fleeting it is. But it's a great smell. Really love it. This is the problem with some brands. I don't know, is their DNA like Celine? Celine's fragrances are kind of light. They're subdued. I like fragrances to have a little more projection. Le Labo's fragrances have gotten very low projection lately. I don't know, maybe it's the clientele they're attracting. It smells so good. It's lavendery, it's spicy, there's a creaminess there. It's really, really lovely smell, but I wish it was a bit more beefier. Come on, Le Labo, launch some extracts, but I'm sure they're going to overprice the heck out of them. And last but not least, I'm going to end this on this note. Tom Ford's Beau de Jour. And the rumor is this thing is discontinued. Why? Why would they discontinue this? I thought this was one of the best fougère fragrances ever made. It's a lavender overdose. Really wonderful stuff. But maybe it's not selling. Maybe there's an ingredient that's banned. Oh man, it's good. The herbs and the lavender in this is so realistic. Like I'm just in the lavender field and running my hands through the herbs and it's all over my hands. So it smells realistic. But I think it's very classy. I don't know what's going on with it, why it's discontinued. It's not on the, it's still on the Tom Ford website, but they've crossed out, you can't buy it. I can't find it at the retailers, not Macy's, no Neiman Marcus. So I don't know. It's probably discontinued, but really one of the best fougères. And again, a lavender overdose. I believe Beau de Jour has 3 types of lavenders. Again, you can really realistically smell the lavender in this. Super awesome fragrance. And that's the last fragrance for the last note, the number 10 note of lavender, guys. What are your thoughts? I know this was a longer than normal video. I chit-chatted with you guys. But let me know your thoughts on all the notes I spoke about today. If you think that there should be another note listed in this category, in this kind of a theme, do let me know. Maybe jasmine, maybe rose. Do you consider patchouli? I thought about these notes. I know they've been used for quite a while. The rose, the patchouli, jasmine, maybe even hyacinth. What else can I think of? Ylang Ylang I was mentioning earlier, gardenia, tuberose. These are all like notes that have been used for such a long time. But I think they're still being used quite frequently. I left them off because I felt like they haven't been passé, kind of like some of these notes are pretty passé. Obviously, lavender is not as passé because they still produce fragrances with lavender. But as I said, the earlier ones in this list are the most passé, and then we've got the ones that are at the bottom of the list, and those are still being used, but still very vintage kind of notes. But let me know what else you would add to the list. Add a comment below. And let me know some of your favorite notes and also some of your favorite fragrances that I discussed in this video as well. Like Oakmoss. Are you a fan of this note? Do you wish it was brought back? Do you know about IFRA regulations? Yeah, they do exist and they do regulate. Man, somebody was recently telling me there was this ingredient that's being controlled, regulated soon, and I forgot. And I gotta try and think of who told me this. But it was a pretty common note that I think is being regulated by IFRA very soon. But anyway, thanks so much for watching today's video on these vintage notes, a top 10 list with 50 fragrances. Please let me know your thoughts on this video and what would you like to see next. So by the time this video airs, I will be traveling. So probably a few weeks after I get back, I can start producing more of these long form videos. And I'm hoping you're enjoying them. I know some of you do not like long form videos. Some of you do. Maybe pause the video and come back. I know YouTube has all kinds of like things you could do where you can watch later on all these things. And that's what I do with the content that I watch. And you can do the same thing. But some of you do really enjoy long form videos, and I'm happy that you guys are tuning in. Thanks again for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please click the subscribe button and also the bell icon. And also please give a thumbs up for this video so that it'll help with the algorithm and more people can see it. But I appreciate you tuning in. Stay tuned for more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.